Wing Commander Ian Traynor from The Guardian. There have been calls quite recently from senior alliance officers saying that basically the concentration on military targets is insufficient to have the necessary impact on the regime, and that the targeting should be widened to infrastructure targets. First of all, I'd just like to ask it whether NATO is hearing this recommendation and what its response is, and B, we also have reports about the Interior Ministry in Tripoli being attacked, and whether that might be part of a changing strategy. Thank you.
Ian, thank you very much. It's a very pertinent question. First of all, the United Nations mandate is to protect civilians at all time, and we're doing that with care and precision, unlike the regime, which is systematically attacking civilians using human shields. Sir David Richards makes clear the campaign is a significant success for NATO, and we are maintaining a high operational tempo and seeing results on the ground. This isn't a purely military solution, but it is clear that the time is up for Gaddafi. And I'll come back to Oana in a minute to cover any further on that. As for the piece you referred to as the Interior Ministry, what I do know is that as part of NATO's strike package into Tripoli last night, the United Kingdom hit a number of NATO targets. Royal Navy Tomahawk missiles and Royal Air Force Tornado aircraft hit a command and control facility and a military training base. Now, NATO doesn't disclose individual targets or contributions from nations, but if you want to get more details about those particular sorties, if you can refer back to London and the Ministry of Defence, I'm sure they'll give you more. Oana, would you like to take anything further on the question about NATO?
I think it's clear, as Mike said, that the targets are an operational secret. As you know, we don't go into operational details, but we can assure you that each and every target we have hit is a military target, and we are keeping up a high operational tempo. As you've heard, almost 7,000 sorties in just over 6 weeks, and we are seeing the results on the ground. We have been hitting, as you can see from today's operational update, command and control centers. We've been hitting ammunition sites, bunkers, and critical targets, critical objectives that are playing a role in the command and control of attacks on the civilian population. David, Reuters.
Well, yeah, David Brunstrom from Reuters. Just to follow up on that previous question, does that mean then, in fact, that you are not going to extend the campaign to non-military targets, the infrastructure which was referred to by the British General?
Obviously, David, we are continuously reviewing our operations to adapt to changing circumstances on the ground. FT Deutschland.
You said you want to focus more, or want to focus on command and control centers. How do you define a command and control center? Is it, let's say, any point from which the dictator Gaddafi has a connection to his troop? Would you define that as a command and control center too? Yes or no? Thanks.
As we said, Klaus, obviously we don't go into operational details. What we are hitting are clearly military targets. We do not target any specific individuals. That has been made repeatedly clear, and I can say that once again here, we are not targeting specific individuals. We are focusing on command and control centers or any other military targets that are playing a role in coordinating and running attacks against the civilian population. I think you have a follow-up.
So how do you define a command and control center?
Mike may want to come in on that. I would define a command and control center as a site from which the attacks on the civilian population are being coordinated and run from.
Absolutely. From an operational perspective, a command and control center is where the planning and execution of an operation is put together, and it's then passed down to the forces in the field who then deliver that. What I mean by that is anywhere that's planning it, they pass the information, they communicate it to forces on the ground who then attack innocent population. And that is what we're stopping. We're stopping that command and control facility to stop the communication to the forces in the ground who deliver those weapons.
I think we have ANP there.
Hans de Bruin, Netherlands Press Agency. Can you explain why a training facility on the outskirts of Tripoli is a direct threat to the civilian population elsewhere in Libya?
Okay, the training facility is a tactical issue. It's a target that has been selected by the nations involved in this operation. It's been cleared as a legal target. It fulfills the requirement within our target set. And beyond that, our rules of engagement and our selection of targets is not something that we will discuss today.
What I would add is that, of course, as you all know, the rules of engagement have been agreed by all 28 allies. ZDF.
Kai Niklas from German television ZDF. Mike, can you give us an idea where the pro-Gaddafi forces are still strong? Because on the last briefing we have learned that in Misrata there were no tanks left and there was hardly anybody firing at NATO troops. And now you are bombing training facilities in the outskirts of Tripoli, and I wonder myself, where are the fights going on?
There is fighting going on across Libya. We continue to monitor the situation, and where we identify targets, whether they are what we would call dynamic targets, something that is seen on the ground, about to or involved in or capable of attacking civilian population and identified as being used for that, they will be struck. It's quite clear that targets across Libya that are being used in that manner will be taken out by the NATO operation.
AFP?
Laurent Thomé with Agence France Presse. Can you comment on reports that Muammar Gaddafi has been wounded, and also separately on reports that people close to the regime are fleeing the country or Gaddafi? And also, last question, earlier you mentioned that you were dropping leaflets and sending radio communications encouraging forces to leave the regime. Do you have any evidence that they are dropping their weapons? Is it having any effect?
Okay, two parts to that really. One is regarding Gaddafi. We do not track his position as a target. Our targets are selected of those to do with command and control and weapons that are being used against the civilian population. So I think that issue is closed from my perspective. On the side of the information in leaflets and within the radio broadcasts, this is something that that goes on to ensure that not only the forces on the ground, but also the civilian population know that it is not sensible to be near military installations, particularly command and control installations, to be near military vessels, military vehicles, and these messages that are being sent out on the radio stations and through the 140,000 leaflets that have already been delivered into the airspace and into the locations within Libya are passing that same message. Come away from such military equipment and go back to your bases and your homes.
On your question about defections, we've all seen information from open sources, as you probably have. As you know, we don't have any boots on the ground to confirm any such reports, but if they are true, they would prove once again that the Gaddafi regime is isolated and that people around Colonel Gaddafi realize that there is no future in the regime and that it is now time to let the people of Libya decide on their future. Wall Street Journal.
Stephen Fiddler from the Wall Street Journal. From your earlier answers about the targets, should we conclude that attacking infrastructure targets would not at the moment fulfill the legal requirements that NATO has for determining what targets should be? If that's the case, what would need to happen to change those legal requirements? would there need to be another UN resolution to do that, or could that be done by internal decisions within NATO?
Stephen, it's quite clear the United Nations resolution that we're working to. We're working on an embargo, we're working on a no-fly zone, and we're working on protecting the civilian population. That is the criteria at the operational level to which the commander is working to. Anything outside of that, and if there was to be any change in direction, would come from the NATO headquarters. But at the moment, operationally, it is quite clear exactly what our mission is, and the commander will continue to continue with that mission until told otherwise from higher command. Oana, do you want to add anything to that?
What I wanted to say is that obviously we're not going to go into a discussion on semantics here, but as you have seen from our operational updates, we have been consistently striking military targets, including command and control centers and bunkers and ammunition sites. We will continue to keep up the pressure until the military goals have been met, and we will continue to review our operations in light of the situation on the ground. Until now, there has been no discussion in the North Atlantic Council about the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement have been agreed by consensus by all 28 allies. Ian.
Oana, it's not really a semantic discussion. David Richards says military targets is not enough. You need to go for infrastructure. Basically what we're asking, you're saying that you're only hitting military targets. Basically what we're asking is infrastructure a military target, or is it beyond the scope of the current mission as defined by the rules of engagement? It's not a semantic argument.
Well, we're not going to go into operational details. Laurent, AFP.
Still in that same line of questions. Earlier, when Commander, you said that you define command and control center where the planning and execution of an operation is put together and then passed on to forces in the field. So could that mean that Libyan regime generals or colonels are putting together plans inside a school building or an interior ministry building? Would that be considered then a command and control center and then a legitimate target?
Thank you for that. It's a good question. If we were to identify a command and control target, we would rationalize that within our rules of engagement. And if it was considered that we could deliver precision weapons with minimal or no casualties, and it was a clear command and control target, that target would be taken. If there was any doubt, then that target would not be taken at that time. And when the appropriate time came, we would take the target.
And obviously, as we said before, what matters is the effect on the ground. You are seeing that NATO is keeping up the pressure. You do see the effect on the ground, and we will keep up that pressure until the military goals set by NATO allies and partners have been met. FD Deutschland.
So sorry, just to clarify, the command and control center, it's not important, let's say what technical installations or whatever are inside, but what matters is who is inside this so-called command and control center. It doesn't have anything to do with technical installation. These people could meet each other at any time at a tent in a desert or whatever. It's just important who meets.
No, the activity, the planning and delivery of attacks onto the civilian population by a command and control center would make it legitimate command and control target. The people, as we've said before, it's not about individuals, it's about the activity that's being conducted. And if that is delivering armament onto civilians, that would make it a legitimate target.
And obviously, as we have said since the start of the operation, as in all NATO operation, we are conducting this mission with great care and precision to avoid any civilian casualties. Very much unlike the strategy pursued by the Gaddafi regime, which now stands accused of crimes against humanity. I will go to Naples, Mike, if there are any questions at your end.
There are no questions here in Naples.
One more, over there, le soir.
Yes, Gérard Gaudin, Belgian News Agency. Is there no NATO representation in Benghazi already, or not?
Okay, I heard, is there no NATO representation in Benghazi? From an operational perspective, it's quite clear. We do not have boots on the ground, as it's called, or forces on the ground in Libya. We have a clear direction as to what our mandate is. Beyond that, at a diplomatic level, Oana, do you want to add anything?
We all know that there are several allies and other nations that have representation on the ground, but NATO has no representation in Benghazi at this stage. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much to everybody who's come to the briefing.